In 1972, in the quiet town of Springfield, New Jersey, the morning started like any other. Families were getting ready for their day and everything seemed to be pretty normal. But something strange happened that would shock the whole town. Police were called to a wooded area near a place called Hudali Quarry. There, they found a body of a young girl who was lying face down at the top of a tall cliff called the Devil's Teeth. She was fully dressed, but her body was badly damaged and no one could tell how she died. The police later learned that she was Jeannette DePalma, a 16-year-old who had been missing for 6 weeks. Around her body were strange shapes made from sticks and logs, and some people said they looked like crosses or even a coffin. Others believed it was part of a dark ritual. Rumors of witches and scary cults began to spread, but was Jeannette really a victim of something evil, or was something even darker being hidden from everyone? Today we will talk about the mystery of Jeannette DePalma and what really happened to her. It was a warm summer morning, August 7th, 1972. Just 4 days after her sweet 16th birthday, Jeannette DePalma walked out of her quiet home on Clearview Drive in Springfield, New Jersey. She told her mom, Florence, that she was going to take the train to visit a friend, but instead of the train, Jeannette decided to hitchhike. Something people actually did a lot back then, so it wasn't her first time. In fact, all the stories you hear about of don't get into cars with strangers, don't take candy from strangers, stay away from creepy vans without windows, this is literally the era that it comes from. So this time though, when she did hitchhike, something went wrong. Jeannette never arrived at her friend's house. She didn't call, she didn't come home, and she was never seen alive again. The DePalmas were a big, loving family, and Jeannette was one of their 8 kids. They were strong Christians, known and respected in the church, and Jeannette herself was full of faith. She was not the kind of girl that people expected to just run away. So when she didn't come home that night, her parents, Salvatore and Florence, knew something was very wrong. The next morning, they went to Springfield police and then reported Jeannette missing. Also, something to note, just for yourself, you don't have to wait 24 hours or 48 hours for anybody to go missing, especially when they're of this age. You can report it the second you think somebody goes missing, and the cops will start looking into it. That whole crap about, oh, you have to wait 48 hours to file a missing person report. Now, so for the next 6 weeks, people would end up searching, and volunteers walked forests and fields calling out her name. They looked everywhere, but there was no sign of her. It was like she had just vanished. The community would end up holding a candlelight vigil for her as churches also continued to pray for her. Then, on September 19th, something shocking would happen. A dog came home to an apartment on Wilson Road. His mouth had a human arm. The owner called the police right away, and officers followed the trail back to a place called Hudali Quarry. It was quiet, rocky, hidden. There, on a steep cliff known as the Devil's Teeth, they found something that was absolutely heartbreaking. Jeannette's body still fully clothed. But what the police saw at the scene was very strange. The area around her looked unnatural, fairly disturbing. Around her body, wooden logs were arranged carefully. Some thought it looked like a makeshift coffin. Others said it looked more like an altar. Sticks had been placed along the ground, shaped like crosses. Everything had been positioned just so, and it made the place feel odd, almost like someone planned it. Like it wasn't just a random scene. It wasn't the way anyone would expect to find a body either. Because her body had been exposed to the elements for weeks, it had started to decompose, and that made it hard to figure out what exactly had happened. But Dr. Bernard Ehrenberg, the Union County medical examiner, used dental records to identify her. He tried to learn more by looking at her bones and used a skeletal x-ray to see if there were any signs of injuries. But there was nothing. No broken bones, no bruises, no bullet wounds. Nothing had told him how she actually died. Dr. Ehrenberg guessed that Jeannette might have been strangled, but he couldn't say for sure. With no signs of clear trauma, her death was treated as suspicious instead of murder. Even now, her death certificate still says the cause is pending further study. Then, the toxicology report came in. This report would check drugs or alcohol in somebody's body, and it showed no signs, no drugs, no alcohol, nothing strange. Except for one thing. There was an unusually high level of lead in the body. No one could explain where it had come from, and samples of Jeannette's clothes, her blouse, slacks, and underwear, along with dirt from where she was found, were sent to the FBI crime lab for testing. They hoped to find something, anything, that might help. But when the test came back, there were no foreign hairs or clear DNA. The stains on her clothing were too damaged to test for blood or really anything else. At that that time, forensic science was not as advanced, I guess, as you could say it is now. Many of the tools we rely on this current day and age, like modern DNA testing, just simply did not exist back then. After Jeannette DePalma's body was found, the police followed every lead that they could, and one tip ended up standing out. Someone told them about a homeless man who lived in the woods not far from where Jeannette's body was discovered. People in the area called him Red, and according to the tip, Red had suddenly left his campsite right after Jeannette went missing. At first, it seemed like a fairly large clue. The police even made a sketch of Red's face and put it in the bulletins, asking anyone who had seen him to come forward. Eventually, though, they did find him. He was brought in for questioning, and as people waited, hoping he might know something, it would turn out after a full investigation, the Union County Prosecutor's Office said that he had nothing to do with Jeannette's death. Red was cleared, and with that, the case would go cold again. No other suspects were ever named. No one was ever arrested, and the truth of what happened to Jeannette was never found. One of the officers who found Jeannette's body, Ed Kish, later said that the cops are really only as good as the evidence left behind, and in Jeannette's case, there was zero evidence. But while science couldn't solve it, the strange way her body was found, surrounded by logs and sticks and crosses, and all this sparked wild theories and a blossoming fear. At that time, in the early 1970s, America was changing. Many families were becoming more religious, trying to pull away from the free love culture of the 1960s. Churches were filling up, and Jeannette's own family was a part of that. They were devoted members of the local Assemblies of God Evangelical Church. But something else was growing alongside this faith, a new kind of fear that would later be called the Satanic Panic. People started hearing stories about witches, black magic, and satanic rituals, even when there was no real proof. The news ran scary headlines because they're the news and they run out of things to talk about, as talk shows then brought on guests with wild stories. Most of it, though, wasn't true. But when Jeannette's body was found on a cliff called Devil's Teeth, and when police said there were crosses and maybe kind of a wooden coffin around her, it didn't take long for the rumors to begin. Some thought Jeannette had been a part of a dark ritual, that she'd been killed by people who worshiped devil. The whispers spread through Springfield like wildfire. Jeannette had been strong in her faith, and to many, she was the exact kind of person who would stand against darkness. And some believed that was exactly why she was chosen. Then the story took an even stranger turn. Someone claimed they found a dark book in Jeannette's bedroom. It was called the Satanic Bible, written by a man named Anton LaVey. That book was known for teaching things that were against God, things linked to witchcraft and evil. While these rumors spread, another strange thing was also happening nearby. Just 2 miles from where Jeannette's body was found, there was a large forest called Watchin Reservation, and it was pretty quiet and green, basically a nice place that you would think. But it was also known as a place where groups met in secret, groups that followed neo-pagan beliefs. Then came a very weird report. The Union County Park Police found something deep within the woods. They found burning candles, a bowl filled with blood, and pigeons lying still with their necks broken. To the people in town, it was no small thing. They believed cults were meeting in the woods, and they believed those same cults had something to do with Jeannette's death. Even the police started to take this idea fairly seriously. In a 1972 newspaper called the Courier News, printed a shocking report that would kind of grab everybody's attention. It said that officers may have brought a witch to a crime scene, not to arrest her, but to ask her what kind of ritual might have taken place there. No one ever said who the witch was, and her name was really never shared. But George Parcell, the police chief in Springfield at that time, admitted that he had heard something. He said some people from the department might have brought a witch, but he didn't know any more than that. Then more fear came when something that had happened just 1 year earlier kind of came to light. In the town of Westfield, a father named John List did something horrific. He killed his whole family, his wife, his mother, and his 3 children. Then he disappeared. When police finally found him, he said something that was fairly disturbing, that his family was turning away from God and his daughter Patricia was getting interested in witchcraft. He believed he had to save them from the devil, and to him, the only way to save them was to take their lives. Years later, when John List had finally been caught, he said something that was also equally horrific. He actually used Jeannette's death as the example. He said it showed that witchcraft was spreading during that time and pulling kids in like his daughter, who was now starting to stray away from faith. But even before that, another dark story had shaken New Jersey. Just a few months before the List murders, a teen named Patrick Michael Newell had been killed in Millville. 2 of his own friends tied his arms and legs and then threw him into a sand pit. He drowned while they watched. When the police asked why they did it, one of the boys gave another kind of just similar answer. He said Patrick was a part of a Satan-worshiping group. He said Patrick had to die a violent death to be put in charge of 40 leagues of demons. Both teens were found guilty of murder, but their case set off alarms across New Jersey. Now, the police weren't just investigating crimes, they were looking into what they believed believe might be like a voodoo cult operating within their state. These stories added fuel to the fire, and people were already scared. So when the idea came up that Jeannette's death was also tied to Satanism, the public and the press just completely ran with it. Newspapers started printing bold headlines. One article of the Elizabeth Daily Journal was titled "Girls Sacrificed Witch Rite." It talked about these strange shapes and signs found near Jeannette's body, and it didn't take long for fear to continue spreading like wildfire, which it already was. Even Jeannette's pastor, Reverend James Tate, joined in. In the same article, he said something many would never forget. He believed Jeannette had been taken by a group called the Devil's Disciples. He had ended up believing that they became angry with her and killed her because of her strong faith. Before long, big newspapers like the New York Star-Ledger and the New York Daily News were printing stories similar to this. They said Jeannette had been killed in a dark ritual. But as the rumors about cults and rituals spread through New Jersey, not everybody agreed with them. One man who stayed firm in his belief was Officer Donald Schwartz. He had been one of the first people to find Jeannette's body. Donald never forgot what he saw that day, and he said Jeannette was wearing tan pants and a navy blue shirt, and the memory haunted him, not just as a policeman, but also as a father. He had $5 of his own, and when he saw Jeannette lying there, it felt like it could have been one of them. To Donald, there were no signs of witchcraft or satanic activity at that scene. He believed his fellow officers had misread the clues, letting fear and imagination take over. He said they saw things that weren't really there. Officer Donald had a different idea. He thought Jeannette's death had something to do with drugs, not because she was using them, but because of the people she was around. He said the spot where she was found, the Devil's Teeth, was known as a party place for teenagers. He believed she might have just overdosed and the others got scared and ran away, leaving her alone instead of calling help. Even though toxicology reports showed no drugs in her body, Donald still felt sure that people she was with had been using drugs that night. He said, "Somebody had to have been with her. She had flip-flops on, I had hiking boots, and I still had trouble getting out to that hill." To him, this meant she didn't just go up there alone. Another person who believed drugs may have played a role was Edward Salzano, a former private investigator who also runs the Justice for Jeannette DePalma Facebook page. Edward agreed that Jeannette may have gotten involved with the wrong people. He said there was a group in town at that time that was fairly dangerous. People were experimenting with LSD for the first time, and things were getting a little bit out of control. He didn't believe Jeannette was using drugs herself. He believed she just got caught up in something bad and didn't make it out. Jeannette's family also spoke up. One of her nephews, Rasasi, said clearly that Jeannette wasn't a drug user. Even though Jeannette's parents described her as quiet and deeply religious, her private diary showed a more complex side of life, as it usually does. She wrote about going to parties, drinking, and even kissing boys. At one point, her mother became so concerned she moved Jeannette to a new school, hoping to keep her away from what she called bad influences. Now, none of this means Jeannette was doing anything wrong, but it showed that she may have been spending time with other teenagers, as teenagers tend to do, but some of whom may have been involved in dangerous things like drugs. By November of 1981, nearly a decade had passed since Jeannette's death. Her mother, Florence, had grown tired of getting no help from the Spring Police. Police refused to release reports, they ignored requests for crime scene photos, and wouldn't share any details. Years later, when the case had been brought up again, the department claimed that all records before 1995 had been destroyed in a flood, and with no evidence retested, no new suspects questioned, Jeannette's case slowly cold. That is, until 1997. That year, two journalists from the magazine Weird New Jersey, Jesse Pollack and Mark Moran, received a strange letter from a fan named Billy Martin. The letter was titled "In the Watchung Mountains." Billy wrote about a memory from long ago. He said a dog had brought home a human arm, which led police to a case involving ritual sacrifice at a place called Hudali Quarry near Springfield. Jesse and Mark were curious, but this was before the internet was full of easy answers. They had a hard time finding any case that matched Billy's strange story. Still, it was so unusual that they decided to publish the letter in their October issue of Weird New Jersey. They didn't expect much, but then something surprising would happen. Readers gave a strong reaction. Many had grown up in Union County during the 1970s. One reader told them that her name was Jeannette DePalma, and she was found altered. Now that they had a name, Jesse and Mark started digging. What they found would be fairly shocking. They found an old story saying Jeannette's body had been discovered in the woods, surrounded by what some would call occult symbols. People at that time believed that witches or Satanists had been involved in death, but even though so many years had passed, when Jesse and Mark went to speak with people who had lived nearby, they discovered something that they wouldn't expect. People were still afraid. No one wanted to talk about what had actually happened. It seemed like the case would stay buried in the past until anonymous letters would begin to arrive. These weren't just ordinary letters. One came from someone who said they had been literally a part of the cult in the area known as the Witches. This group, the writer claimed, had planned to kidnap and sacrifice a child. Another letter was from a person who said they were related to a local police officer. They described how the search for Jeannette had followed arrows carved in trees. These arrows seemed to guide the investigators straight to her body. Even more disturbing, the letter said that police had found dead animals. Some were tied to trees, other places in glass jars, and just days later, there were more animal mutilations reported in a nearby park called the Watch Renovation. Other letters said that there had been even more ritual crimes, but that the police hid the truth to protect the reputation of the town. With all these stories piling up, Jesse and Mark decided to write a book. They called it Deaths on Devil's Teeth. It became the most complete story about Jeannette's case ever written, and every time new evidence appeared, they would update it. But even after the book, one big thing was still missing, which were the official documents. The police kept saying they didn't exist anymore, that the flood had destroyed everything, and still, Jesse and Mark didn't give up. They filed legal requests under New Jersey's Open Public Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act. And finally, in February of 2021, they got what they had waited for. The case files arrived. So they weren't destroyed. And they weren't just words on paper, they also received the original crime scene photos. So for the first time in 50 years, someone could finally see what the scene really looked like and what was found. And it was terrible. All the stories people have been told, the rumors of crosses, altars, and rituals, those were not true. There were no wooden crosses, no coffins made out of logs, no signs of animal sacrifices, no red arrows carved in trees. The only thing that looked even close to a cross was two old branches lying on the ground half rotted. They had probably been there long before Jeannette had ever even come to that spot. There was even a diagram drawn by an investigator named Glenn Owens. It proved that the scene was nothing like what had been reported. His drawings showed that the branches did not form a coffin. There was no log cross above her head like people had claimed. So the big question is, why did the police claim it looked like an occult ritual site? I mean, it was terrible, but why go occult? The photos showed clearly. Even the officers must have known that the stories weren't true. But that wasn't the only thing that the photos proved wrong. One officer, Donald Schwartz, had claimed the area where Jeannette was found was a popular party spot for drug use, but that too seemed to be made up. There were no beer bottles, no cigarette butts, no empty cans, wrappers, or anything that would show teenagers had even been out there in the front. Teenagers like wrecking places. They don't clean up after themselves. It just is what it is. So the fact that this stuff was missing, probably nobody out there. So the spot was covered in dense bushes and tall plant. It would have been hard to even walk through, let alone throw a party out there. The police files also reveal that Jeannette's purse was missing, but about 8 feet away from her body, investigators had found some of the items that had once been inside it. A small packet of tissue, a Vicks inhaler, a compact mirror with lipstick, a comb, a single key on a ring, and a tiny box of eyeshadow, as well as a clear vial with an unknown substance in it. There were no signs of her necklace, which her family had always said she wore, and all the money she had was taken with her was also gone. For years, her family had told police that her cross necklace was missing, but the police always just brushed it off. Now, 50 years later, the files finally confirmed her family had been right all along. So now Jesse and Mark had the evidence. The police were wrong, or maybe even lying, that the crime scene showed occult signs in the first place, because clearly the pictures don't lie. The area wasn't a drug spot and the case files weren't destroyed. Why lie about all this? So now let's take a look at some other theories. I mean, the most popular one obviously being theory 1 is murder. One of Jeannette's nephews, John Banksy, told Jesse and Mark about something he had heard from a trusted source. He said that there was a young man, the son of a police chief, who had a crush on Jeannette, but when Jeannette turned him down, he got angry and may have actually killed her. John said the young man placed her body on the side of a cliff where he knew police officers would find it fairly quickly, because it was right next to a police shooting range in the woods. John also claimed that the boy, unable to live with the guilt of what he had done, later took his own life. The second theory is Wayne Tate's involvement. This theory on the internet points to someone very unexpected, Reverend Tate's son, Wayne Tate. Now, there's no real proof that Wayne was involved, but people started talking about him after they learned that Wayne had dated Jeannette. They broke up just 2 weeks before she died. Wayne's father, Reverend Tate, was always talking to the media about Jeannette's case. He kept saying witches and dark magic were behind her death, and some people think he may have been doing that to take attention away from his own son. Strangely, neither Wayne nor his father were ever officially questioned or investigated by the police. So what could have happened? While many theories have been suggested over the years, some of them holding, more water and some of them having no strong proof at all, there is no real evidence that the police chief's son, Reverend Tate's son, or any occult group was ever involved. Most of these ideas are based on rumors or just even anonymous tips, not facts. And this has left people wondering if the real answer might be something completely different. Some people think that Jeannette may have just been killed by a serial killer, someone who had done this before. His name was Richard Cottingham. He lived in New Jersey, just like Jeannette, and he worked a normal job and had a family, but he was hiding a fairly dark secret. People would later call him the Torso Killer. Cottingham attacked young girls and women. He tortured, hurt, and murdered them before leaving their bodies in wooded areas. He once said he had killed between 85 to 100 women before he was caught. He was definitely active in New Jersey at that same time that Jeannette had gone missing. In 2021, Cottingham sent a letter to Jesse and Mark, again the investigators for Weird, New Jersey, and he said he might have been the one who picked up Jeannette while she was hitchhiking. This gave many people chills, as Cottingham had killed other girls in that area, like Marianne Pryor and Lorraine Kelly, who were also last seen hitchhiking. He even gave the police details only the real killer would know. Jesse and Mark told the police about Cottingham's letter, and the police talked to him, but never shared if anything important came out of it. Still, there's one big problem. Most of Cottingham's victims were killed in very violent ways, and Jeanette's remains didn't show that kind of violence. In a recent documentary, Edward said he believed something very dark had happened in Jeanette's case, something so serious that people are still too scared to talk about even after all these years. He also pointed out something strange about how Jeanette's body was found. The dog that discovered her arm was very small, and the photos showed the plants around her body were untouched. That made him believe the dog didn't find the arm naturally. He suspected someone had placed it near the apartment on purpose to lead the police to the body. Edward tried to take legal action against the Union County Prosecutor's Office. He wanted them to test Jeanette's clothes and fingernail scrapings using modern DNA tools. His group also asked for Jeanette's body to be tested again, thinking that new science could find clues that were missed 50 years ago. They believe that since police once made false claims about occult signs at the scene, it's possible other parts of the case were mishandled or covered up too. Still, the police chief in Springfield said the case is considered a suspicious death and that there hasn't been enough evidence to officially call it murder. Even today, we still do not know what really happened to Jeannette DePalma. But thanks to people like Edward Salzano, who started the group Justice for Jeannette, more people are paying attention, hoping that someday the truth will finally be known. So what possibly could have happened here that, doesn't, I guess, could maybe explain what's going on? The problem is that you have a station or you have a group of people who have already lied, right? The files did not get destroyed. There were photos taken. All these things surrounding the case clearly show the information was there, but people were being denied. So at that point, there is something about the police department that's compromised to a degree that they aren't sharing the information that should be available. 50 years later, they should be able to do it, even if it's a cold case at this point, and there should not be an issue with running a DNA test. Why they wouldn't want that to happen or even look into it any further past that point is bizarre. The Satanic Panic of the 70s, a lot of people were dealing with a lot of things. I don't think we actually had a word for serial killers in the 70s, I don't believe. I know the Zodiac Killer and all that. There were very clearly serial killers back then, but you have a plethora of issues going on. The first one is hysteria amongst people can cause other people to react in ways that they wouldn't normally react. You have officers not really giving you the information that you need, that clearly lying about, look, I'm sure there was a flood and some evidence for some other cases was destroyed, and probably what happened is they got put away somewhere, and it's like, yeah, no, it got destroyed because then you had changing of hands and new people getting hired, old people forgetting where it went, that type of deal. So they probably did genuinely think it was destroyed. And then when they finally had to put somebody on it, he's like, all right, I'll take a look. And then they found, oh, the evidence wasn't destroyed. But past that point, why not look into it to see if you can solve it? I think is the best way to put it. Is it funding? Is it you just don't want to? Is it 50 years so you don't care? Does the family not, like, obviously the family would care, but I think her parents, I don't know if they would still be alive at this point. But all of this is a bit strange, but a lot of it can be explained under normal circumstances. Now, why was she out there? That remains to be seen. My money is definitely probably on serial killer because that would make the most amount of sense as to anything like that. Placing an arm next to an apartment, doubtful. Do serial killers want to be discovered? I think a little bit they do, but would they intentionally remove an arm and then place it near that area and then be like, oh, well, the brush was, unmessed with? Look, grass will lay down for a second if it's lawn, but if you get a strong enough wind that blows by, it fixes all of that. So it's a bit hard to just assume that, they wouldn't just naturally be there and, oh, everything was undisturbed so the dog couldn't have gone out there. There's a lot of assumptions being made just by, naturally occurring things not existing. So I don't know. To me, it's probably a serial killer who was in the area at that time. It probably could have been Cottingham. Not 100% sure, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Either way, I hope you enjoyed learning about this. Once again, the topics covered on this channel, not exactly the most uplifting and wonderful, but you know, as always, you gotta understand what's out there. It's not sunshines and rainbows and unicorn fart. Like, humans are violent creatures, and we always have been. We find caves from way back in the day where there were skulls cracked into. They're very clearly serial killers back then. They're serial killers now. To assume that a stranger is a friendly person, this is just the way I view the world. You might not view the world this way, and that's totally fine, but I don't assume strangers have good intentions. I assume it's good intentions until no, right? And I know that like the whole thing, like most murders happen from people that you know, but I when it comes to other people, I'm very reluctant to just believe that they're good people until they've proven to me that they're good people. Anyways, it doesn't matter. I do want to thank you guys for watching, regardless of my rant, and I want to thank my patrons real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Invictus Echo, Michigan Dogman, Monkey Man, and Scrungle. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. At the Secondhand Accounts tier, we have Bianca, Fred Rush, Stutz, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support as well. It was a long way towards helping out, so thank you. All right, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.